Sign it. Just sign the paper, Claire. Don't make this harder than it has to be. That was my brother's voice. Low, controlled. The kind of voice that sounds calm on the surface, but has something cold underneath it, like ice forming on a lake you can't see through. I was standing in the kitchen of my parents' house, the house I grew up in, the house where I had learned to ride a bike in the driveway and burned my first batch of cookies in that same oven, and my brother was holding a document in front of me like it was nothing, like he was asking me to sign a birthday card. I didn't sign it. That decision cost me almost everything, and then it gave me back more than I ever expected. My name is Claire. I'm 29 years old. I work as a forensic accountant, which means my entire job is finding the numbers that don't add up, the tiny discrepancies people think no one will notice, the figures that have been quietly moved around in the dark. I'm good at it. I've always been good at it. And I think that's exactly why my brother underestimated me. His name doesn't matter. I'll just call him my brother. He's 6 years older than me, 35, and he has been my parents' favorite since the day I was born. Not in the way parents sometimes accidentally prefer one child and feel guilty about it. In the deliberate, declared way. My parents never hid it. My brother was the firstborn son. He was the one who carried the family name. He was the one who got the car at 16, the tuition paid in full, the down payment on his first house handed to him like pocket change. I was the one who took out student loans, who worked 2 jobs through college, who called my dad on the phone every Sunday because I genuinely loved him and wanted that connection, not because I expected anything in return. My dad was a good man. I want to say that clearly, because this story is about what happened around him, not what he did. He was quiet, steady, the kind of person who fixed things with his hands, and apologized when he was wrong. He had a trust set up years ago, nothing extravagant, but meaningful. The family home, some investments, a savings account he had built over 40 years of working. He told me once, when it was just the 2 of us in his garage while he was replacing the brake pads on my old Honda, that he had split everything evenly. 50-50. You both worked hard, he said. You both deserve it. I believed him. I never had any reason not to. My husband, Daniel, knew everything about my family from the beginning. We had been together since I was 24, married for 2 years, and he had sat across from my brother at enough holiday dinners to understand the dynamic, without me having to explain it. Your brother looks at you like you're furniture, he told me once. Not unkindly, just honestly. Daniel is an engineer. He builds things carefully, and he doesn't say things he doesn't mean. When he said that, I knew it was true, and I filed it away in the part of my brain where I keep facts that are uncomfortable but important. My dad had a stroke 8 months ago. He survived, but it left him with limited mobility on his left side and some cognitive fatigue. He tired easily. He struggled to focus for long periods. He was still my dad, still cracked the same jokes, still asked about my work, still held my hand when I visited, but he was diminished in ways that made my chest hurt to look at directly. My brother started coming around more after the stroke. I thought, foolishly, that it was because he finally understood that time was limited, that he wanted to be present. It wasn't that. The first sign was the attorney. I found out about him sideways. My mom mentioned in passing that a lawyer friend had come by to help Dad get his paperwork in order. When I asked which attorney, she said she couldn't remember the name. My mom has never, in her life, forgotten the name of anyone she considers important. She remembers the names of the children of people she met once at a church potluck in 2009. She did not forget this lawyer's name. She chose not to tell me. I called Daniel that night from the parking lot of a grocery store, still sitting in my car with 2 bags of produce in the back seat. Something is wrong, I said. I know, he said. What do you need? That's the thing about Daniel. He doesn't try to talk me out of what I'm feeling. He just asks what I need. I told him I needed to see my dad alone, without my brother or my mom in the room. He said he would come with me and keep them occupied while I talked to my dad. We went the next Saturday. My dad was tired that afternoon, but clear. We sat together on the back porch while Daniel helped my mom with something in the kitchen. He had offered to fix a cabinet hinge she'd mentioned, which bought us 40 minutes easily. I asked my dad, gently, if anything had changed about his estate plans. He looked at me with this slow, searching expression, the way he does now when he's pulling information through the fatigue. Changed? He said. No. Why would anything change? Has anyone asked you to sign anything recently? He thought about it. Then he said, your brother brought some papers. Said it was just updating the address on the trust. I signed where he pointed. I kept my face completely neutral. 29 years of being the invisible child had taught me how to do that, how to receive information that hits like a fist to the sternum, and not let a single muscle in my face respond. I asked him if he remembered which pages he signed. He didn't. I asked if an attorney had been present. He said a man was there, but he didn't speak much. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I called the county recorder's office. In my state, certain trust amendments that involve real property have to be recorded. I gave my parents' names and property address. The clerk put me on hold for 3 minutes. When she came back, she told me a trust amendment had been recorded 11 days ago. I asked for a copy to be mailed to my work address. Then I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee going cold in front of me, and I thought about my brother standing in that living room, pointing to lines on a document while my father, diminished by a stroke, signed where he was told. The copy arrived 4 days later. I opened it at my desk at work, before anyone else arrived, in the quiet of an office that smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. The amendment restructured the trust entirely. My share had been reduced to the personal property in my childhood bedroom, some furniture, some books, a few things I had left behind when I moved out at 22. My brother received everything else. The house, the accounts, all of it. And at the bottom of the amendment, next to my father's signature, there was the signature of a notary public and a witness. I photographed every page. I forwarded the photos to Daniel. Then I opened a new file on my work computer, and I started doing what I do for a living. I started looking for the numbers that don't add up. My brother came to my parents' house the following Sunday for dinner. I was there too. Daniel sat beside me and put his hand on my knee once under the table, a small, quiet anchor. I watched my brother pour wine and tell stories and accept my mother's compliments about his job, his apartment, his life. I ate my dinner and I smiled at the right moments, and I said almost nothing. This is a technique I later read about extensively. Psychologists call it the gray rock method, becoming as interesting and reactive as a gray rock, giving the other person nothing to work with. I had been doing a version of it my whole life without knowing it had a name. After dinner, when my dad had gone to rest and my mother was in the kitchen, my brother brought out the document. That's when he said it. Sign it. Just sign the paper, Claire. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I looked at the paper in his hand. It was a separate document, a quitclaim deed for the house. He wanted my signature, formally relinquishing any claim to the property. Dad already handled the trust, he said. This just cleans everything up. What does Mom think about this? I asked. Mom agrees. He said it flatly, without looking toward the kitchen. And Dad? Does Dad know you're asking me to sign this? There was a pause, very small. Dad is tired, my brother said. He doesn't need to be bothered with this. I looked at the deed. I looked at my brother's face. He had the expression he's always had when he's absolutely certain he's going to get what he wants. Not arrogance exactly, more like boredom. Like the outcome was already settled and this was just administrative. I put my hands flat on the table. I'm going to need some time to review it, I said. His jaw tightened. There's nothing to review. It's straightforward. I'm a forensic accountant, I said pleasantly. I review everything. I drove home with Daniel, and I didn't cry until we were in our own driveway with the car off. And then I cried for about 4 minutes, the hard, ugly kind, and then I washed my face in the bathroom and I sat down at the kitchen table and I opened my laptop and I kept working. Here is what I found. The notary listed on the trust amendment, a woman whose stamp and signature appeared at the bottom of every critical page, had a license number that, when I cross-referenced it with the state licensing database, had been expired for 14 months. An expired notary cannot legally notarize documents. Anything she stamped in that window was invalid. The witness signature on the amendment was a name I recognized, a college friend of my brother's. I had met him once at a Christmas party years ago. He was not an impartial third party. In our state, a witness who has any beneficial interest in the outcome of a document, or who is connected to someone who does, is disqualified from serving as a witness to that document. And then there was the signature itself. My father has a very distinctive signature. He developed it over decades. It starts with a large looping C for his first initial, drops into a flat middle section, and ends with a sharp upward hook on the final letter. I had seen that signature on checks, on birthday cards, on the letter he wrote me when I graduated college. I knew it the way I knew his voice, or the smell of his workshop. The signature on the amendment was close. Someone had practiced. But the loop on the initial was slightly too small, and the terminal hook angled left when my father's always angled right. My father had not signed that document. My brother had. I called an estate attorney the next morning. I found her through a colleague who had used her in a probate case, a woman named Margaret, who came highly recommended and who, when I explained the situation over the phone, went very quiet for a moment, and then said, "Can you bring me everything you have?" I brought her everything. The recorded amendment, the photographs, my analysis of the notary's license status, the witness conflict of interest, the signature comparison I had documented side by side with copies of my father's authentic signature pulled from records I had legitimate access to. Margaret spread it all across her conference table and looked at it for a long time without speaking. "This is document fraud," she said. "Potentially elder financial abuse, depending on what your father understood when he signed, and forgery on the amendment itself." "What do I do?" I asked. "First," she said, "we make sure your father is protected. Second, we report this. Third, we fix it." Daniel came with me to my parents' house the following Tuesday. We didn't call ahead. My brother was not there, which was what I had hoped. He lived 40 minutes away and typically only came on weekends. My mother answered the door and looked at Daniel with the polite wariness she has always extended to him, like she hasn't fully decided whether he's allowed. I asked to speak with my dad privately. My mother started to object. Daniel, calmly, and without any aggression, said he would love to sit with her and catch up, and he guided her toward the living room, with such natural ease that she was seated and talking before she seemed to realize she'd been redirected. I sat with my dad in his bedroom. He was in the recliner by the window where he likes to read. I told him what I had found. I kept my voice steady, and I watched his face carefully, watching for confusion or distress. There wasn't confusion. What I saw was something worse and more dignified than that, a slow, incremental dawning, the look of a man assembling pieces he had not wanted to assemble. He told me it was administrative, my dad said quietly, updating the address on file. Did you read what you signed? A long pause. I trusted him, he said. I held his hand and I didn't say anything for a minute. Then I told him what we were going to do, and I asked his permission, and he gave it. Margaret filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's Elder Financial Abuse Division 3 days later. She also filed a motion to void the fraudulent amendment and restore the original trust documents. The original trust had been prepared years ago by a different attorney, a man named Harold who had been my father's attorney for over 20 years. Harold still had copies. The original trust was clean, properly notarized, properly witnessed, and it said exactly what my father had told me in his garage years ago. 50-50. My brother found out on a Thursday. I know this because he called me 4 times in a row starting at 6:47 p.m. I did not answer. He left one voicemail. His voice in it had a quality I had never heard from him before, slightly too fast, slightly too controlled, like someone talking through clenched teeth. He said I was making a mistake. He said I was going to destroy the family. He said our parents would never forgive me. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to Margaret. My mother called the following morning. She cried. She said I had always been ungrateful. She said she didn't know what she had done to deserve a daughter like me. I listened to all of it. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I did not provide any emotional reaction she could use as ammunition. I was a gray rock. When she finished, I said, I love you, Mom. I have to go, and I ended the call. Daniel was standing in the kitchen doorway. He had heard everything. He didn't say anything, just opened his arms, and I stood there in our kitchen and let myself feel it for exactly as long as I needed, to the grief of it. The weight of realizing that the family you wanted to have and the family you actually have are 2 entirely different things, and that loving the idea of something doesn't obligate you to let the reality of it keep hurting you. Then I made coffee and I went to work. The investigation moved faster than I expected, partly because I had handed them a case that was already assembled. The forensic document examiner the Attorney General's office used confirmed what I had found about the signature. The amendment had not been signed by my father. The notary, when interviewed, initially claimed she had been present. When confronted with the fact that her license had expired 14 months before the document was dated, she changed her statement. She said she had been asked by my brother to provide her stamp for a document that was just a formality. She said she hadn't looked closely at the date. She had looked closely enough to cash the check my brother had written her, but that was a detail for the prosecutors to work with. My brother's college friend, the witness, had a lawyer within 48 hours. His lawyer advised him to cooperate fully. He cooperated fully. The morning the investigators went to my brother's apartment, I was at my desk reviewing quarterly reports for a client. Margaret called me and I stepped into the hallway to take it. She told me what was happening. I stood in that beige hallway with fluorescent lights overhead, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not triumph, not satisfaction exactly, but a kind of bone-deep exhaustion releasing from places I hadn't realized I was holding it, the way a muscle feels after you finally stop clenching it. Is Dad okay? I asked. He's okay, she said. Harold is with him. He's okay. There was a family meeting, eventually. Not the kind my family might have wanted, not a gathering around the dinner table where someone apologizes and everyone agrees to move forward and put it behind them. It was a meeting in Harold's conference room with Margaret present, and my parents across the table from me and Daniel. My mother sat with her hands in her lap and did not look at me directly for the first 40 minutes. My father sat very still and looked older than I had ever seen him look. And at one point, without warning, he reached across the table and put his hand over mine and said, I'm sorry, Claire. I should have seen it. I told him he had nothing to apologize for. My brother was not there. He was managing his own situation, which had become, quite rapidly, legally complicated. The elder financial abuse charge alone carried significant weight. Document fraud compounded it. His attorney was advising him to explore a plea arrangement, which would mean acknowledging what he had done in exchange for a reduced sentence. Margaret told me this in the way that attorneys deliver information factually, without dramatic emphasis, but I sat with it for a long time afterward. The weight of it, the waste of it. The original trust was reinstated in full. The fraudulent amendment was voided by the court. The quitclaim deed I had never signed meant there was nothing to undo on that front. The house remained my parents' house, and the trust remained what my father had always intended it to be, a document built not on favoritism but on fairness. My mother and I have not repaired things. I don't know if we will. There is a particular kind of grief in acknowledging that a parent chose one child over another so completely, so deliberately, that they were willing to watch the other one be cheated and say nothing. My mother knew. She had known the moment my brother brought that lawyer to the house, and she had made her choice, and she had sat across from me at dinner and watched my brother slide that document across the table, and said nothing. I cannot unknow that. I don't think she can either. But my dad calls me on Sunday mornings now. Not because I have always called him, which I have, but because he calls me first. Last Sunday, he called at 8 a.m. and we talked for an hour about nothing important. His physical therapy progress, a documentary he had watched, a recipe my grandmother used to make that he was trying to reconstruct from memory. Before we hung up, he said, "I'm glad you're stubborn, Claire." I laughed. I told him I had gotten it from him. Daniel and I went back to our regular life. Not the regular life we had before all of this, because that life had been built on a foundation that included illusions about my family that I no longer had. A different regular life, one that is smaller in some ways and considerably more solid. We have dinner with friends on Friday nights. I go to the gym at 6 in the morning because I like the quiet of it. Daniel is working on a project at work that excites him in the way that engineering projects sometimes do, where he talks about load-bearing calculations with the same enthusiasm other people reserve for sports. Last weekend we painted the spare bedroom a deep green that looked alarming on the paint chip and exactly right on the wall. Some nights I still sit with the version of my family that I wanted, the one where my parents loved their children equally, where my brother and I had the kind of relationship where we could call each other for no reason, where the house I grew up in meant warmth and safety, rather than what it now means. I let myself feel that loss. I don't think it serves anyone to pretend those losses aren't real. But here is what I know now that I did not know a year ago. The most expensive thing I ever purchased was my own clear-eyed understanding of the situation I was actually in. Not the one I wished I was in. Not the one my family presented to the world. The actual one. It cost me my brother, my relationship with my mother, and several months of the kind of stress that sits in your chest and makes it hard to breathe deeply. It was worth every single cent. Because on the other side of it there is this. A father who calls me on Sunday mornings. A husband who stood beside me in every room this required me to walk into. And a life that belongs entirely and completely to me. Not assembled around other people's expectations of what I should accept. Not built on staying quiet to keep the peace. Not dependent on the approval of people who only extended it conditionally. If you are reading this and you recognize something in it, if there is a document being passed across a table toward you, if there is a voice telling you not to make things harder than they have to be, if there is a family that has always asked you to be a little less, so that someone else could be a little more, I want you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to look closely. You are allowed to find the numbers that don't add up. You are allowed to be, in the most fundamental sense, a gray rock, when what is required is that you do not react, so that you can think. And you are allowed, when you have thought it all the way through, and assembled your evidence and found your attorney, and taken every careful, deliberate step, to open that door and let the consequences walk in. The house is still standing. My father's hands still look the same as they always did. The trust says what it always should have said, and I sign nothing.